The bullet shattered the lantern beside Amelia's head, spraying kerosene across the wooden floorboards as she scrambled toward the back door of her brother's ranch house. Jesse Whitmore had been drinking again, and this time his rage had escalated beyond the usual bruises he left on her arms. She could hear him reloading in the parlor, cursing her name with a venom that made her blood run cold. The year was 1878, and in the Kansas plains where her brother's ranch sprawled across hundreds of acres, there was nowhere to hide and no law willing to intervene in family matters. She had endured his violence for 3 years since their parents died of consumption, but tonight something inside her had finally broken when he raised his gun instead of his fists. The September night air hit her face as she burst through the door, her thin cotton dress offering little protection against the wind that swept across the open prairie. She ran toward the barn where her mare was stabled, her bare feet finding purchase on the dusty ground despite the darkness. Behind her, she heard Jesse's boots hitting the porch steps, heard him bellowing her name into the night. Her fingers fumbled with the stable latch, and then she was inside, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horses. The chestnut mare whinnied softly as Amelia threw a blanket over her back, not bothering with a saddle. There was no time. She swung herself onto the horse's back just as Jesse appeared in the barn doorway, his silhouette backlit by the moon. He raised his rifle, and Amelia dug her heels into the mare's flanks. The horse bolted forward, charging past Jesse and out into the open prairie. Another shot rang out, but the bullet went wide. Amelia leaned low over the mare's neck, her fingers tangled in the course mane, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had no destination in mind, no plan beyond putting as much distance between herself and her brother as possible. The mare galloped through the darkness for what felt like hours. Amelia's legs ached from gripping the horse's sides, and her hands were raw from clutching the mane. When the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern horizon in shades of pink and gold, she finally allowed the mare to slow to a trot. She had no idea where she was. The landscape around her was unfamiliar, dotted with rocky outcroppings and scrub brush. In the distance, she could see a thin column of smoke rising into the morning sky. She guided the exhausted mare toward the smoke, hoping it meant civilization, hoping it meant safety. As she drew closer, she could make out a small homestead nestled in a valley between 2 low hills. It consisted of a modest wooden cabin, a barn, and a corral where several horses stood. A man was working near the corral, and as Amelia approached, he looked up, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his hip. Amelia pulled the mare to a stop about 20 feet from the man, suddenly aware of how she must look, disheveled and barefoot, riding bareback in a torn dress. The man studied her for a long moment, his hand still resting on his gun. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered from years in the sun, but there was something kind in his expression that made Amelia's racing heart slow just a fraction. "Help me," she said, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "Please, I need help." The man's eyes swept over her, taking in her torn dress, her bare feet, the desperate look in her eyes. His hand dropped away from his gun, and he stepped forward slowly as if approaching a frightened animal. "You are hurt?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "My brother," Amelia said, and then her throat closed up. She could not find the words to explain the years of abuse, the fear that had become her constant companion. "He tried to kill me." The man's jaw tightened and something dark flashed in his eyes. "Get down from there," he said, moving to stand beside the mare. "You are safe now." Amelia slid from the horse's back, her legs nearly buckling when her feet hit the ground. The man caught her elbow, steadying her. His touch was gentle, nothing like Jessica's rough handling. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name is Daniel Vance," he said. "This is my land. Come inside, and I will get you some water and food." He led her toward the cabin, his hand still supporting her elbow. The mare followed behind them, too tired to wander off. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. There was a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a stove, and a bed in the corner covered with a quilt. Daniel pulled out one of the chairs for her, and she sank into it gratefully. He brought her a tin cup filled with cool water from a pitcher, and she drank it down so fast she nearly choked. He refilled it twice more before she finally felt the burning thirst subside. Then he set about making coffee and heating up what looked like leftover stew from the previous night. While he worked, Amelia studied him. He moved with an economy of motion, each gesture purposeful. There was a calmness about him that made her want to trust him, though she knew better than to trust men easily. When he set the bowl of stew in front of her, she realized she had not eaten since the previous morning. She forced herself to eat slowly, even though her stomach was cramping with hunger. Daniel sat down across from her with his own cup of coffee, watching her with those steady gray eyes. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "My brother's ranch, about 15 miles northeast of here, I think," Amelia said between bites. "The Whitmore place." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know of it. Big spread. Your brother is Jesse Whitmore." "Yes." The name felt like poison on her tongue. "I have heard he has a temper," Daniel said carefully. "He is worse than that," Amelia said, setting down her spoon. Her hands were shaking. "Our parents died 3 years ago and Jesse inherited everything. At first, he just drank too much and said cruel things. Then he started hitting me. Last night he shot at me, twice. I could not stay there anymore." Daniel's expression hardened. "You did the right thing by leaving. But where can I go?" The question came out as a sob. "I have no money, no family except Jesse, no skills except keeping house. He will come looking for me. He always said if I ever tried to leave, he would hunt me down." "He will not ever find you here," Daniel said firmly. His eyes met hers and she saw the conviction in them. "This land is mine, bought and paid for. I do not answer to anyone, and I do not fear men like your brother. You can stay here as long as you need." Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Daniel said simply. "Because no one should live in fear like that." She wanted to believe him, but fear had been her companion for so long she did not know how to let it go. "What if he finds me? Then I will deal with him," Daniel said. There was steel in his voice now, and Amelia realized that, beneath his calm exterior, this man was not someone to be trifled with. "But he will not find you. This homestead is off the main trails, and I do not get visitors often. You will be safe here." Amelia nodded, blinking back tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Finish your food," Daniel said, his voice gentling. "Then you should rest. You look about ready to fall over." He was right. The adrenaline that had kept her going through the night was fading, leaving her bone weary. When she had finished eating, Daniel gave her his bed, insisting he would sleep in the barn. She protested, but he would not hear of it. Too exhausted to argue further, Amelia lay down on the quilt and fell asleep almost instantly. She woke hours later to find the sun high in the sky and voices outside the cabin. Her heart lurched with fear until she recognized Daniel's calm baritone. She got up and peered through the window to see him talking with an older man who sat astride a paint horse. They spoke for a few minutes, and then the man rode off. Daniel returned to the cabin to find Amelia standing by the window, her face pale. "It was just old Tom from the neighboring ranch," Daniel explained. He was asking if I had seen any stray cattle. I told him I had not seen anything unusual. You did not tell him I was here. No. What happens on my land is my business. Daniel crossed to the stove and poked at the fire. You are welcome to stay as long as you like, but we should probably work out some sort of arrangement. I do not want you to feel like you are taking charity. I want to work for my keep, Amelia said quickly. I can cook and clean and mend. I helped run my father's household before he died. Daniel nodded. That seems fair. I am not much of a cook, and this place could use a woman's touch. If you take care of the cabin and the cooking, I will provide shelter and protection. It was a simple arrangement, practical and businesslike, but it gave Amelia a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Over the following days, she settled into a routine. She woke early to make breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the cabin. In the afternoons, she mended Daniel's worn clothes and prepared supper. Daniel spent his days working with the horses he raised and trained, occasionally disappearing for hours to hunt or check his fences. They developed an easy rhythm around each other. Daniel was not a talkative man, but his silences were comfortable, not oppressive like Jesse's had been. He treated Amelia with a respect she had almost forgotten existed, always asking before entering a room she was in, never raising his voice, never making demands. Slowly, over the course of weeks, Amelia began to feel the constant knot of fear in her chest start to loosen. One evening in early October, as they sat at the table eating the venison stew Amelia had prepared, Daniel spoke up. You have never told me your first name. Amelia looked up, surprised. She realized they had fallen into calling each other Miss Whitmore and Mr. Vance. It is Amelia, she said. Amelia. He said it slowly, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. That is a pretty name. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thank you. You can call me Daniel if you like, he said. Mr. Vance makes me feel like an old man, she smiled. You are not old. How many years do you have? 26, he said. And you? 22, she replied. They fell silent again, but it felt different now, more intimate somehow. Amelia found herself studying Daniel's face in the firelight, noticing the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he almost smiled, the strong line of his jaw, the capable hands that could gentle a wild horse, but would not hesitate to defend what was his. As autumn deepened and the nights grew colder, Amelia found herself thinking about Daniel more and more. She noticed the way he always saved the best portions of meat for her at meals, how he chopped extra firewood without being asked, how he had fashioned a pair of simple leather shoes for her from an old saddle blanket when he noticed her feet were still bare. These small kindnesses touched her in ways his words never could. One morning in late October, Amelia was hanging laundry on the line Daniel had strung between two posts when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Her blood turned to ice. She dropped the shirt she was holding and ran toward the cabin, but Daniel appeared from the barn, moving quickly to intercept her. Get inside and stay away from the windows, he said quietly, his hand on his gun. Is it Jesse? She asked, her voice shaking. I do not know yet. Just get inside. Amelia did as he said, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She crouched beside the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. 3 men on horseback were approaching the homestead. Jesse was in the lead, his face flushed red even from a distance. Flanking him were 2 of his ranch hands, both armed. Daniel stood in the yard, waiting for them with his hand resting casually on his gun. He looked relaxed, but Amelia could see the tension in his shoulders. Jesse pulled his horse to a stop about 10 feet from Daniel. You are Vance. I am. What can I do for you? Daniel's voice was calm, almost bored. I am looking for my sister. Girl about 20, brown hair, green eyes. Someone said they saw her heading this direction about a month back. I have not seen anyone matching that description, Daniel said evenly. Jesse's eyes narrowed. You are sure about that? Because I will find her eventually, and if I discover someone has been harboring her, there will be consequences. Is that a threat? Daniel asked, and now there was an edge to his voice. Just a fact, Jesse said. She is my sister, my responsibility. She is not right in the head sometimes, runs off when she gets confused. I need to bring her home where she is safe. Amelia felt bile rise in her throat at the lie. Jesse was trying to make it sound like she was mad, like he was a concerned brother instead of a violent drunk. Like I said, I have not seen her, Daniel repeated. Now, if you are done, I have work to do. Jesse stared at him for a long moment, and Amelia could see the calculation in her brother's eyes. He was trying to decide if Daniel was telling the truth, if it was worth pushing further. Finally, he spat on the ground and wheeled his horse around. If you do see her, you let me know, he called back over his shoulder. There is a reward for her safe return. Daniel said nothing, just watched as the three men rode away. He stood in the yard for several minutes after they disappeared from view, making sure they were truly gone. Then he came into the cabin to find Amelia sitting on the floor beside the window, shaking uncontrollably. He knelt down beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence. He is gone, he said gently. He knows I am here, Amelia said through chattering teeth. He knows. He suspects, maybe, but he does not know for certain, and even if he did, he cannot force his way onto my land. I will not let him take you. You do not understand, Amelia said, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. Jesse does not care about laws or property rights. If he decides I am here, he will come back with more men, and he will burn this place to the ground if he has to. Then I will be ready for him, Daniel said firmly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Amelia, I meant what I said. You are safe here. I will protect you. She looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses on his palm from years of hard work, at the strength in his fingers. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk so much for me? Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because when I look at you, I see someone brave, someone who fought her way out of hell and survived, someone who deserves a chance at a real life, not one lived in fear. He paused, then added more softly, and because somewhere along the way I have come to care about what happens to you. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She searched his face and saw the truth there in his eyes. This strong, quiet man who had given her shelter and asked for nothing in return had somehow come to care for her. And she realized, with a jolt that went through her entire body, that she cared for him too. Somewhere between the shared meals and comfortable silences, between his small kindnesses and steady presence, she had started to fall in love with Daniel Vance. I care about you too, she said quietly. Something shifted in Daniel's expression. He reached up with his free hand and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I have been trying not to say anything, he admitted. You have been through so much, and the last thing I wanted was to make you feel pressured or uncomfortable. But if Jesse comes back, if things get dangerous, I need you to know that I would do anything to keep you safe. Anything. I know, Amelia said, and she did. She could see it in every action he took, every word he spoke. Daniel Vance was a man who meant what he said. He helped her to her feet, and they stood there for a moment, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then, very slowly, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and gentle, nothing like the brutal handling she had endured from Jesse, and it made her heart swell with an emotion so strong it almost hurt. Over the following days, things between them changed. The comfortable silences became charged with awareness. Amelia found herself watching Daniel as he worked, admiring the strength in his arms, the concentration on his face. She caught him watching her too, when he thought she was not looking. They did not speak of what had passed between them, but it was there in every glance, every accidental touch. 2 weeks after Jesse's visit, Daniel came in from the barn one evening looking troubled. "There is a storm coming," he said. "A bad one from the look of those clouds. We should prepare." They spent the evening securing the horses in the barn, bringing in extra firewood, and filling every container they had with water from the well. By the time full dark fell, the wind was howling across the prairie, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. The storm hit with a fury that made the cabin walls shake. Thunder crashed overhead, and lightning illuminated the room in brief, blinding flashes. Amelia tried to stay calm, but when a particularly loud clap of thunder made her jump, Daniel crossed the room and sat down beside her on the bed where she was huddled. "It is all right," he said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "The cabin is solid. We are safe." She leaned into him, drawing comfort from his presence. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside. At some point, Amelia realized she had pressed her face against his chest, and his other arm had come around her, holding her close. She could hear his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "Daniel," she said softly. "Yes, I am glad I found you that morning, glad I ended up here." His arms tightened around her. "So am I." She tilted her head back to look up at him and found his face inches from hers. In the flickering light from the fire, his eyes were dark and intense. "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered. "I know I am falling in love with you," he replied, and then he kissed her. It was nothing like the kiss to her forehead had been. This was deeper, more passionate, full of all the emotions they had been holding back. Amelia's hands came up to grip the front of his shirt, and she kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as someone working for room and board, but as my wife if you will have me." Amelia's heart felt like it might burst. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and then another, as the storm raged on outside. That night, with the wind howling and the rain pounding on the roof, they made love for the first time. Daniel was gentle and patient, always making sure she was comfortable, always giving her the choice to stop if she wanted. But Amelia did not want to stop. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe, truly cherished. In Daniel's arms, she was not a victim or a burden. She was a woman loved. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. They lay tangled together in Daniel's bed, their bed now, watching the sunlight stream through the window. Daniel played with her hair, running his fingers through the long strands. "We should ride into Wichita next week," he said. "Find a preacher to marry us proper." "What if someone recognizes me?" Amelia asked, though she was surprised to find the fear was less sharp than it had been. "Then I will tell them you are my intended, and anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me," Daniel said firmly. "You are not going to hide anymore, Amelia. We are going to build a life together, out in the open." She smiled and kissed him. "All right." They spent the next week preparing. Daniel rode out to the nearest ranch and came back with a bolt of blue fabric he had traded for, so Amelia could make herself a proper dress for the wedding. She worked on it in the evenings while Daniel carved a simple wooden box to hold their marriage certificate. They made plans for the future, talking about expanding the horse operation, maybe building a larger cabin someday when children came along. The mention of children made Amelia pause. She had never allowed herself to think about having children, knowing what kind of home Jesse's ranch would have been for them. But now, with Daniel, the idea filled her with warmth and hope. "How many children do you want?" she asked one evening. Daniel looked up from the bridle he was mending. "As many as the good Lord sees fit to give us," he said. "But I hope we have at least 2 or 3. I was an only child, and it was lonely sometimes." "I had Jesse," Amelia said quietly, "but I know what you mean. He was never really a brother to me, even before our parents died." Daniel set aside the bridle and came to sit beside her. "Our children will grow up knowing they are loved," he said, "and knowing their mother is the bravest woman I have ever met." She kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. "And they will know their father is the finest man in Kansas," she said when they broke apart. The day came when they were to ride into Wichita. It was a crisp November morning, and they set out early, both riding on Daniel's best horses. Amelia wore her new blue dress, and Daniel had on a clean shirt and his good hat. They looked like any other young couple heading into town, and Amelia found herself relaxing as they rode. Wichita was bustling when they arrived. Cowboys drove cattle through the streets, and merchants hawked their wares from storefronts. Daniel led them to a small white church at the edge of town, where a kindly old preacher agreed to marry them for a small fee. There were no witnesses except the preacher's wife, no flowers or fancy trappings, but when Daniel slipped a simple gold band on Amelia's finger and kissed her as man and wife, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. They were heading back to their horses when Amelia heard a familiar voice call out her name. She froze, her blood turning to ice. Jesse stood across the street, staring at her with murder in his eyes. He had 2 men with him, the same ranch hands from before. "Run," Daniel said quietly, his hand going to his gun. "No," Amelia said, surprising herself. "I am done running." Jesse started across the street toward them, his face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful little wretch," he snarled. "I have been searching for you for months." "And you have found her," Daniel said, stepping in front of Amelia. "Amelia Vance, my wife. Now leave her alone." Jesse's face went purple. "Wife, you married this drifter." "He is a better man than you could ever hope to be," Amelia said, finding her voice. She stepped out from behind Daniel, standing beside him instead. "I am not afraid of you anymore, Jesse. You have no power over me." "The hell I don't," Jesse spat. He reached for his gun, but Daniel was faster. The sound of Daniel's gun being cocked echoed through the street, and suddenly everyone around them was scattering, ducking into doorways and behind wagons. "You do not want to do this," Daniel said, his voice deadly calm. "There are witnesses everywhere. You draw that gun, and it will be self-defense when I shoot you." Jesse hesitated, his hand on his gun but not drawing it. His 2 ranch hands looked nervous, clearly not eager to get into a shootout in the middle of town. The local sheriff appeared from his office down the street, drawn by the commotion. "What is going on here?" the sheriff demanded, his own gun drawn. "This man is harassing my wife," Daniel said, not taking his eyes off Jesse. "We just got married at the church, and he is threatening us." "That woman is my sister," Jesse protested. "She ran away from home, and I have been looking for her." "I left because my brother beat me and tried to kill me," Amelia said clearly, loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "I have the scars to prove it. He is a violent drunk, and I want nothing to do with him." The sheriff looked between them, taking in Amelia's conviction, Daniel's protective stance, and Jesse's obvious rage. "Miss, are you claiming your brother abused you?" "Yes," Amelia said. "For 3 years after our parents died, he beat me regularly. The night I left, he shot at me twice. I barely escaped with my life." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Jesse's face went from purple to white. "She is lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She is my wife now," Daniel said. and she is under my protection. If you come near her again, I will not hesitate to defend her. Do you understand me?" The sheriff looked at Jesse. "I think you should head on home, Whitmore. Your sister is a grown woman and a married one now. She has made her choice." Jesse looked like he wanted to argue, but the crowd was clearly on Amelia's side, and the sheriff had his hand on his gun. Finally, with a string of curses, Jesse turned and stalked away, his ranch hands hurrying after him. The tension drained from the street. The sheriff holstered his gun and tipped his hat to Amelia. "Sorry you had to go through that, madam. If he bothers you again, you come straight to me." "Thank you, Sheriff," Amelia said, her voice shaking now that the confrontation was over. Daniel wrapped an arm around her waist, steadying her. "Let us go home," he said gently. They rode back to the homestead in silence, Amelia still trembling from the encounter. But as they rode, she realized something had shifted inside her. She had faced Jesse, had stood up to him in front of witnesses, and had won. He could not touch her anymore. She was free. That night, curled up in bed beside her husband, Amelia allowed herself to truly believe it. She was safe. She was loved. She had a future ahead of her that did not include fear and pain. The winter months passed peacefully. Daniel taught Amelia to ride properly, and she proved to be a quick learner. She also learned to handle a rifle, insisting that she wanted to be able to defend herself and their home if the need arose. Daniel was a patient teacher, and by the time spring arrived, Amelia was a decent shot. They heard nothing more from Jesse. Daniel made a few quiet inquiries and learned that Jesse's ranch was struggling. Several of his hands had quit after word spread about how he had treated his sister, and he was having trouble hiring new men. Amelia felt no satisfaction at the news, only a sad sort of closure. In March, Amelia realized she had missed her monthly courses. When she told Daniel, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. They were going to have a baby. The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Daniel hovered anxiously, bringing her dry crackers and ginger tea. But as the months passed and her belly began to swell, she bloomed with health and happiness. Daniel could not keep his hands off her, constantly touching her stomach and talking to the baby. "I hope it is a boy," he said one evening in late summer as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "A son to carry on the Vance name." "As long as the baby is healthy, I do not care," Amelia said, lacing her fingers through his. "Either way, they will be loved," Daniel said, kissing her temple. "So very loved." In October, exactly 1 year after Daniel had proposed, Amelia went into labor. Daniel rode hard to fetch the midwife from the nearest ranch, and she arrived just in time. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Daniel feared he might lose both his wife and child. But Amelia was strong, stronger than even she had known, and as the sun rose on a new day, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas Daniel Vance, after Daniel's father. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and Daniel wept openly the first time he held his son. Amelia watched them through exhausted, happy tears, marveling at the life they had created together. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic toddler who loved following his father around the ranch. When he was 2, Amelia gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Grace. 2 years after that came another son, Michael James. Each birth was a little easier than the last, and each child was welcomed with the same overflowing love and joy. The ranch prospered under Daniel's hard work and Amelia's careful management of their household finances. They built a larger cabin to accommodate their growing family, with separate bedrooms for the children, and a real parlor where Amelia could entertain the other ranch wives who had become her friends. Daniel's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and he began to command premium prices for the animals he trained. They heard that Jesse had lost his ranch to debt and had moved away. Some said to California, others said to Montana. Amelia felt a pang of sadness for the brother he could have been, but no regret for the man he had become. She had long since forgiven him, not for his sake but for her own, letting go of the poison that bitterness would have brought to her life. One evening in the spring of 1887, Daniel and Amelia sat on the porch of their home, watching their 3 children play in the yard. Thomas was 9 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of becoming as fine a horseman as his father. Sarah was 7, with her mother's gentle nature and a love for books that Daniel indulged by bringing her home any volumes he could find on his trips to Wichita. Michael was 5, all wild energy and infectious laughter. "You ever regret it?" Daniel asked, taking Amelia's hand in his. "The life we have built here. I know it is not easy, being so far from town, raising children on the frontier." Amelia looked at her husband, at the man who had given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go, who had promised she would be safe and had kept that promise every day since. She looked at their children, healthy and happy and secure in the knowledge that they were loved. She looked at the land they had built their life on, the home they had created together. "Regret it," she said, squeezing his hand. "Daniel Vance, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. This life, this family, everything we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible when I ran away that night. You saved my life, not just by giving me shelter, but by showing me what love really means." Daniel pulled her close, kissing her softly. "You saved mine too," he said. "I was just existing before you came along. You gave me purpose, a reason to build something that would last. You gave me a family, a real home. I love you, Amelia Vance, more today than the day we married." "And I love you," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat there as the sun set, painting the Kansas sky in shades of gold and crimson, their children's laughter echoing across the land. Amelia thought back to that terrified girl who had fled into the night 9 years ago, and she marveled at how far she had come. She had been running from death and had found life instead. She had been seeking shelter and had found a home. She had been escaping violence and had discovered love. The years continued to be kind to them. Thomas grew to be a fine young man who took over much of the horse training as Daniel's joints began to ache with age. Sarah became a teacher in Wichita, though she came home often to visit. Michael proved to have a head for business and helped expand the ranch's operations. Each of the children eventually married and gave Daniel and Amelia grandchildren, filling the homestead with new generations of love and laughter. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Daniel and Amelia stood in the same spot where he had first promised she would be safe. They were grayer now, their faces lined with the years, but the love in their eyes was as strong as ever. "He never found me here," Amelia said softly, looking up at the man who had been her shelter, her protector, her partner, and her truest love. "Just like you promised." "I keep my promises," Daniel said, pulling her into his arms. "Always have, always will." They kissed as the sun set over the Kansas prairie, 2 souls who had found each other in the darkness and had built a life full of light. The cowboy who had given shelter to a desperate woman had gained far more than he had given. And the woman who had been escaping her violent brother had found not just safety, but a love that would last beyond their lifetimes, echoing through the generations they had created together. Their story became a legend of sorts in the area around Wichita, told and retold as an example of how courage and love could triumph over fear and violence. Children grew up hearing about the brave woman who had fled into the night and the cowboy who had protected her. And every time the story was told, it ended the same way, with two people who had saved each other, living out their days in the home they had built together, surrounded by the family their love had created. As Daniel and Amelia grew old together, they never forgot those early days when everything hung in the balance. They never took for granted the simple miracle of waking up beside each other, safe and loved. And when their time finally came, many decades after that first fateful morning when a desperate woman had ridden up to a lone cowboy's homestead, they left behind a legacy of love that their children and grandchildren would carry forward for generations to come. The homestead still stood, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, hope over despair. And somewhere in the Kansas wind that blew across those plains, there remained an echo of the promise Daniel Vance had made to Amelia Whitmore on that long-ago day. "You are safe here. He will not ever find you." A promise kept, a life built, a love that conquered all.